Welcome to our presentation slideshow labeled Environmental Health and Mold Exposure by authors Pam, Mae, and Danielle. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Rodriguez, and today I will be going over our icebreaker. I call this icebreaker this or that. It is a group activity. We're going to get up and moving a little bit. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'll start with some silly ones like, do you like Netflix or Hulu better? If you're team Netflix, I'll have you move over here. If you're team Hulu, I'll have you move over here. Then we're going to get into more topical questions like after you shower. Do you take that wet towel and throw it on the ground? Or do you put it in a hamper? Or do you hang it up afterwards? If you're team floor or team hamper, you'll be over here. If you're team hang it up, I'll have you over here. So after about 5 minutes of that, we're going to take the last 5 minutes and we're going to come together and we're going to discuss your answers and see what was most popular and kind of figure out why we chose everything we did. This will also help us lead into our topic and it'll get us at a better place to know each other and just kind of get us a little loosened up. So when we start this, I would like to give you what I really want you to take away from this. From this presentation, I want you to figure out what mold exposure is. What is mold? How do I get exposed to it? And then I want you to figure out how mold exposure affects you. And then finally, we'll be discussing how to remove and prevent mold exposure. So those are really just three things I want you to keep in mind while we're going through this whole presentation. So first of all, what is mold? Well, mold is a collective term for different species of microscopic fungi. So what exactly does that mean? That means that there are so many different kinds of mold. We'll get into a couple later. And what's growing on your food is not what's growing in your basement, is not what's growing outside. So this mold, whatever it is, it's going to reproduce through mold spores and it travels through our air, which means that when we're breathing in air, we're taking in a little mold sometimes. That also means that mold is collecting in our dust. Does that mean that mold is going to grow on your desk at school? Not necessarily. Mold does need moisture to grow. So that is something to keep in mind later when we're talking about prevention and remediation. However, not all mold is bad. In nature, mold is necessary and it's used to break down a lot of organic material. Unfortunately, a lot of the mold that we encounter indoors can cause a lot of problems to our health, which we will go over. And probably the most scary thing to me to learn was that we cannot get rid of mold. Mold is everywhere, but we can take steps in preventing it from growing. Like I mentioned earlier, it needs moisture to grow. So those things will correlate a little later. Next, how can you spot mold? I'm sure if you're anything like I was growing up, you've seen mold on food. I used to leave my lunchbox from school over the weekend in my room, and I had a great surprise ready, waiting for me. Looked like this picture. Maybe you've seen mold on the walls. Well, mold can look discolored. It can be a lot of different colors. It can be fuzzy. It can have a slimy texture. It stinks. You can only imagine opening that lunchbox on Sunday night, Monday morning, and smelling that. Same thing with the mold indoors. If you're walking around your house and you smell something a little off, chances are it might be mold. So, like I mentioned earlier, it grows where moisture is. So if you've had a leak in your house, if you always leave your swimsuit on the ground and it's been there for a while, if you leave the, if you leave the clothes in the washer, if anything like that is happening, that's a potential for mold. So if you go looking for it, you may find it in those areas. Next, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Mae.
Thank you so much for that introductory to mold exposure. My name is Mae Blake. Let's go ahead and review the next continued outlines of our slides. So we're going to start you off with mold in the environment. Some areas that we might have exposure to mold are going to be within buildings, air pollution, that's both indoors and outdoors, and potential food sources. So let's lightly review each category. Some areas of building exposure are going to come in contact with, that we may come in contact with, are going to be our homes. If we have any appointments at hospitals, maybe even after school activities such as gymnastics or football, maybe hotels if we're traveling, and or schools for the playgrounds, and maybe even high traffic bathrooms as well. Another one is going to be maybe our parents in their offices. Mold exposure and air pollutants are going to be anything that we breathe in that has potential for mold spores. So that can happen indoors and or outdoors. As you can see there, though, that the potential for mold exposure indoors is 10 times worse than outdoors. Outdoors, we have the capacity to take a step away if we smell something unusual or if we need a fresh breath air, but indoors, it's far more contaminated. And if we don't take preventative measures, well, that spore risk of mold and its toxicity is going to increase. It also air pollutants make responsible of 21% of asthma cases. And as you see later on when we review potential health factors, that's going to come up again. It can also lead to cognitive decline. Some common molds that we have here outlined on the bottom left, as you see here, but there are up to 900 strains at the moment, and that's a continually growing list. So that's just the most popular ones, the most common ones that we might come in contact within our environment itself. But the last one we'll review on this slide is going to be food sources. So that's anything that we can ingest or intake into our body. This is not limited to the ones that I have available here, but anything that we ingest or drink that has improper handlage, meaning transportation, or it's being left out and not refrigerated properly, or the process uh, of making the bread or using the grains, or even agriculturally the grains themselves, and growth. If they have any type of exposure to mold contaminants throughout that process, well, that's not something that can be remediated or removed. That's going to have high potential impact on our health. Let's go and take a look at the next slide. So we discussed where we can come in contact, but let's go ahead and review what causes the mold exposure in our environment. So some of the primary ones of potential growth of the mold is going to be moisture that can happen through leaks or humidity. Any type of humidity that's over 50% in our environment is going to allow a lot of growth of those mold spores and allow it to where it can continuously spread, as well as dark and high temperature, so warmth areas. That's a lot of food sources for it. As you can see, there are some other areas such as natural disasters, poor ventilations, and as well as the contaminated food source and overwatering. Let's go and take a look on the implications of our health. So mold on our health is a very scary idea, right? That's a concept that we want to make sure that we don't come in contact with or prevent as much as possible. So individuals who are exposed to mold have 30 to 50% more risk for both short and long-term duration of health implications. So the long-term implications are going to include neurological problems, so that's up in our brain, as well as within our central nervous system. We also have cardiac complications. So that's going to be on our heart, and respiratory. So it's going to be on our lungs. And as we previously discussed, quite a bit of our asthma cases, 21%, comes from exposure to mold on our respiratory system. Some shorter duration of mold implications on our health are going to be more topical ones, such as fungal toxicosis, skin and or eye irritation, and infections. So if you want, you can take a pause here and take a look at what each breakdown is. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. I know we discussed areas in our environment as well as on ourself of what mold can do, but let's go ahead and take a look at how economics play a role in these implications. So as we discussed, if we have large health complications from mold exposure, we're going to need a lot of assistance. That's when that health cost comes in. It can be anywhere between 5.6 billion annually just from infections, or if we have a longer term ailment for respiratory distress, that can be up to 16.8 billion annually. And that's just in North America alone. Some property cost, as we previously discussed, damage in our environment from mold exposure needs proper remediation, right? So those related damages that some of the costs are going to be is 3 billion annually. And any building that isn't properly remediated is going to be up to 30 to 40% less in value, and that's quite a big margin. And any employer who has an employee who needs assistance with their property costs, so they're taking time off to handle mold exposure in their household, they're probably going to also have health implications and need to go take care of their health at doctor's visits. That can lead up to productivity loss, right? So that can have up to 15 billion annually across the states. Let's go ahead and take a review of our last slide. I know we're going really quick through this, but you're doing great staying with me. So some of the preventative strategies that we've been communicating throughout are going to be primary and secondary solutions. Primary solutions are going to be regularly cleaning and maintaining your property. Make sure you have proper ventilations. We want to check that every 3 to 6 months if you are in an industrial sitting. But if you're at a home, you definitely want to do it every 6 months to 1 year duration. You need to have air purifiers hitting between the 30 and 50 percentile of air purification in the environment. Anything over that is going to lead to growth of mold exposure. We need to have prompt remediation of water damages. If water does occur through those leaks and or flooding is understandably going to take a longer duration to clean up, but we do want to clean up any leaks within under 24 hours. Anything over that is going to head into the territory of a larger scale remediation and probability of taking out the affected areas. Secondary solutions are going to be regularly testing, inspections, environmental remediation. So we need to have some sort of plan in place, as well as health consequential monitoring. We need to continuously monitor our health as we progress through to make sure that there's no implications within our environment. And sometimes that can lead to being the first sign that something is going wrong. And I appreciate you sticking along with me so far, but let's go ahead and hand it off to the next individual.
All right, thank you. I'm back again to talk about mold cleanup. So mold cleanup should really be handled by an adult. But if you know these things, you can share something with your trusted adult and you can help get the ball moving or just use this as a resource to come back to for them. So first things first, you want to act quickly. If you see mold, you tell someone because the longer it stays on there, the more property damage it can cause. You're going to have to throw away that lunchbox or those precious pictures that got wet. They're going to have to get thrown away if you just let it sit there too long. Then you're going to want to eliminate the source of moisture. So if it was a leak that caused it, you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that it gets fixed. If you know that mold is growing in your bathroom because you keep forgetting to turn that vent on, you're going to have to start turning that vent on or start opening the shower curtain more. You're going to have to just figure out your own prevention and from the sources ahead and help eliminate that source of moisture. Next, you're going to want to clean the surface. Well, not you. Again, they have tons of different cleanups for them. You have to make sure that whatever you're using is made for mold. And if it's something that can't be saved, it can't be saved, unfortunately. Things that are more porous can't be saved. Your ceiling tiles probably have to go. But this specifically, number 4, applies to everyone. Limit exposure to mold. So if you know there's mold in the area, most likely you're going to want a mask. If they're the ones cleaning it up, mask, gloves, goggles. You don't want it to get into your system and start any health effects for you. And last but not least, call for help. You want to call for help with your parents, but also your parents. There are people who can clean it up for you. There's maintenance, there's cleanup crews, there's people who specialize in this that could help you. Finally, here we have our helpful links that I found for you guys. So the first is the EPA Interactive Mold House. You're going to want to click through different rooms. You can find where sources of mold can be, and you can also find out ways to address them. Then we'll have the California Department of Public Health videos. It'll cover a lot of what we covered today. in a fun little cartoon way, and probably a lot more helpful information for you too if you're just wanting to explore more. And finally, we have this infographic that we created. A lot of it here, as you can see, is stuff that we already covered. What kind of mold there is, how many buildings have mold, where you can find it, how it affects your health, and how you can also prevent it. We have it here that we can see, or if you want to print it out and take it, I also have a link here for you that you can view. And now I'll go ahead and pass it off to Pamela.
This is a closure to our presentation with Pam, Mae, and Danielle. Let's review what we covered. These are the main topics, being health issues of respiratory problems, allergies, and asthma, effective policies that need to be implemented with stringent building codes, public awareness campaigns, and workplace safety regulations that provide comprehensive remediation programs, as well as community engagement that promotes community involvement and educates the public on prevention and remediation. The overall goals were to create healthier indoor environments and protect public health. So in conclusion, addressing mold exposure is crucial for maintaining environmental health, as mold can lead to significant life-threatening health issues due to the inhalation of toxicity. Reinforcement of health policies, including stringent building codes, public education awareness, community official campaigns, workplace safety regulations, and comprehensive remediation programs are necessary to prevent and manage mold growth and factors of exposure. By applying these measures and promoting community engagement, we can safely haven residents of healthier indoor environmental air quality and protect public health experimentation. Here on this slide, you can find the knowledge quiz. Take the quiz on mold exposure. I encourage you to take this quiz to test your knowledge about the topic learned in this presentation. Please click the link to get started. By taking this quiz, you can understand mold exposure is important for your health and safety. By taking this quiz, you can learn valuable information that will help you keep your habitat mold-free. Plus, it's a fun, interactive way to test your knowledge and see how much you already know. The next slide provides the references. These are citation references utilized in this presentation slideshow about environmental health and mold exposure. This is environmental health and mold exposure of key points. The overviews are mold, growth and impact, key areas of focus, causes, health impacts, prevention and remediation, and the policy and education. In wrapping up our presentation on environmental health and mold exposure, this is a reminder that mold is a toxic chemical or substance that causes serious health concerns affecting the vast population. Mold can grow anywhere and can lead to sickness with anyone that encounters it. By learning about the causes, health impacts, and effective prevention and remediation strategies, we can positively reduce the risks associated with mold. Implementing stricter health policies, adhering to safety guidelines, and raising public health education awareness are measurable steps to creating healthier indoor air quality environments. Let's take the knowledgeable insight acquired to move forward in making informed decisions and advocate for safe, mold-free habitual spaces in our homes, schools, and workplaces. Thank you for the supportive attention and commitment to our environmental health topical presentation. Here listed is our contact information through emails if you would like to provide us with any feedback, commentaries with the inquest of filling out this evaluation form link. Your participation would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for your involvement in this presentation. Also, please make sure to follow our YouTube link that covers our group work on the next slide. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you enjoyed our slideshow.
Just a quick reminder, our YouTube link will be here at the bottom of the slide, and it will be available to you through our presentation. Thank you again so much. Have a great night.